What's up, fellas? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Sports Student. My name is Wendell Epps, aka The Sports Student. In today's podcast, I'll be joined by Brian Tripp. Brian has spent many years serving as the play-by-play voice for Penn State men's hockey and baseball. He also has experience announcing high school football games as well. And in this podcast, he'll talk about what it's been like being a play-by-play announcer, as well as sharing some advice on what it takes to become a successful play-by-play announcer in the sports media industry. So sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast, and without further ado, this is a sports student interview with Brian Tripp. All right, folks, today I am joined by Brian Tripp. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How's it going?
It's going well. The pleasure is mine. I hope everyone's enjoying their summer.
I'm sure everyone is for sure. So, Brian, first thing first, can you just go ahead and quickly give a little background of who you are, what you do now, and some of your past experiences within the sports media industry?
Yeah, right now I'm the play-by-play voice for Penn State men's hockey and Penn State baseball. I've been at Penn State since I graduated as a Nittany Lion in 2011, and I've covered basically every of the 31 varsity sports they've had here. Done some television work with Big Ten Network, worked with Westwood One every year on the Frozen Four. This past year was my third national championship, calling the national radio broadcast for the men's ice hockey championships. Some high school football in the fall, doing some TV work regionally for high school football. You know, like any broadcaster, anything I can get my hands on, I want to be involved with. And it's really been such a fun first decade of my professional career. And I continue to love what I do. And they say, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I really feel blessed for the opportunities I've had so far.
That's fantastic to hear. A lot of experience, a lot of variety with what you've done in the past. So I just want to know, how is that covering multiple sports? Do you kind of go in to each sport with that same mindset, or how is it different in some ways?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, no matter what sport you're covering, no matter what the event is you have to love the part of preparation to get ready for that event or that game, whatever it may be. And then I enjoy the diversity because it keeps me on my toes. A lot of people ask, how do you go from hockey, which is such a fast up-tempo sport, to calling baseball, which the rhythm and the pacing is so much different. And to be honest, I love the unique challenge that it provides. So I think having something different, whether it's covering a football game in the fall at Beaver Stadium, a whiteout game, and that task I might be doing sideline reporting or pre and post game show reporting and doing interviews as opposed to calling play-by-play. I think having a variety of skills in this industry is really important, but also I think it's great as someone that has that opportunity to do different things. It keeps it fresh. It keeps you from getting mundane. I'm not sure that this job ever could get monotonous or mundane, but it certainly is enjoyable to see many different things, travel to different places, cover different sports. And the thing I've enjoyed most about the profession is the people that you get to know, the athletes you get to cover, whether it's Saquon Barkley or maybe someone that's on the fencing or the swimming team that doesn't have the recognition or 2.5 million Twitter followers, getting to know their stories. And I think that's the thing that I've enjoyed most, especially about college athletics, is you get to see their stories. Maybe they come in out of high school and you get to know them. You see them grow and develop, not only as a student athlete, but as a person as well, because these are such important years in the maturation process of someone's lives.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm really glad you brought up the whole point of like the variety aspect, because that's something that's definitely very important when it comes to sports media and college athletes. A lot of college athletes honestly have some really great stories coming into playing in their collegiate career. So there's definitely a lot you can look for. And that's why I kind of want to ask you about preparation as an announcer. What's kind of your normal routine when it comes to getting ready to call games?
Yeah, I think it depends on the sport and it depends on my familiarity with the team. So I know the Penn State teams by now like the back of my hand. But it's almost a year-long process. If I see an article about, let's just take college hockey, for example, because that's what I'll be immersed in coming up this fall for the most part. If I see a college hockey article, even in the summer, whether it's on The Athletic or maybe it's draft power rankings for this year's NHL draft, the University of Michigan has up to 6 first-round draft picks playing on their team currently and 3 guys that may go in the top 10 this year. I'm going to click on that and read about it. So I think you're always trying to learn and educate yourself. That way, when it becomes, if you know you're going to have that assignment, when it gets to the week of the game, it's not like cramming for an exam and you're trying to fit everything in your mind. at the last moment. I've learned that there are certain things over the years that you need for a broadcast and certain things that maybe you don't need. I think we have so much information at our fingertips right now. It's how do you parse through that information and select what's going to be most relevant to the broadcast and informative to the listeners. And that may differ between radio, television, if you're doing play-by-play, or if you're doing sideline reporting, or if you're preparing for an interview. But the number one thing is to be prepared, whatever the assignment may be, because I think that's the way that you can garner not only that trust with your audience and your listener, because if you mispronounce a name, or if you say something, and look, we're all going to make mistakes at times, we're human beings, but if you say something that's not factually accurate and you continually make those mistakes, then immediately the audience is going to look at you maybe out of the corner of their eye and, I can't trust this guy. There's not something. You want to develop that rapport with your audience, but you also want to do it. When I prepare, I talk to coaches, I talk to players. And if you're educated on the topic and you can speak their language and have a knowledge of the game, or a knowledge of the opponent, or a knowledge of what they go through on a day-to-day basis, I think that opens up the relationships with them and it gains their trust. And then that in turn will start to get you more information as well. This could be a 30 to 45-minute answer. I hope that kind of starts to give you an inside look at the process. Obviously, look, you want to have the basic stats, some biographical information, maybe a unique story or tidbit on each player, because you never know who's going to be the star. That's what I love about sports. You never know who's going to be the star on that particular day. It could be the fourth string wide receiver, or it could be the superstar wide receiver. And what can you do if it is that superstar wide receiver? Everyone's probably already knowledgeable about where he went to, if it's college. Was he a 5-star recruit? Where did he go for high school? What can you do to enlighten the audience or share something new with them? And I love the challenge of finding that information that maybe people don't know, those stories that people haven't heard before. So it's an arduous task at times. I would say if you spend 3 hours doing a game, 2 hours doing a game, I would spend between 10 and 15 hours throughout the week prepping. It's just, by the time you get everything, and everyone has their own broadcaster chart, my charts are pretty detailed, and I'll have stats on there, stories, comparison of team stats, standings. I just like to have a really wide breadth of knowledge in terms of knowing not only about the team and the players, but also the context. I think context is really important. Why does this game matter? Where does this game rank in terms of importance for league standings or playoffs? Or why should we care about this game? Why should we care about these players? So if you can take your prep and all those stats and information that you have, find out what are the relevant trends, what makes team A different from team B, maybe what are the similarities between team A and team B, and then share with your audience why all that information you have, and you might only get to 10 to 15% of the stats or stories you have on your little spotting board, but you can share with the audience why this matters, what's the importance of this contextually in terms of the teams and the season. Then I think you're good. I know it's a long answer. I could go for way more on it. I can show you some charts too, but that's kind of the best way I can summarize it.
Hey, Brian, that was a fantastic answer, man. I don't think I've asked that question to a couple people before, but I don't think I've heard an answer as great or elaborate as that. So that was awesome.
Let me grab it. I have it right here.
Please feel free to do so. I'd love that. I have
my chart right here. For instance, this is what I'll use for a hockey game here. I know it's hard to see on the Zoom, but it's players, and then I color code what line they're on or what defensive pairing they're on, their stats, where they're from, if they're drafted. This is what I use. Now, I tend to use that a little bit more. I think the speed of hockey, it's very difficult to look down during the game and parse through all the information you have and find that certain statistic just because of the pace and the speed of the game. So I think this is almost like a great way to compile all my thoughts, all my research before the game, almost like you're making a study guide for an exam. And then I have everything right. I don't have to keep clicking through different browser tabs or clicking through or flipping through pages maybe I printed out. I put all of my research on one thing. So not only is it a valuable resource during the game, it's a really valuable resource in preparing for the game, because I have everything right in front of me when I'm studying. So I think that maybe is the best asset of coming up with a scouting board, and everyone does it in their own unique way, which I think is important to note too. Do what's comfortable for you. Some people may be more comfortable as a visual learner, or some people need to handwrite their own charts because they learn best that way. And you might find that you have a better memory than some other people. So you don't have to put everything down on a spotting board. I like to have it there as a crutch and something to lean on to make sure I don't forget about maybe something important during the course of a game.
No, most certainly. I mean, I know for me too, the spotting board's definitely very important. And I think you make a great point. Like, yeah, you may not use everything on that spotting board, but at least having that information on hand if needed, and just to be able to understand and know, and like you said, it's kind of like preparing for an exam. You don't know what's to come, but when it's game time, you just got to be ready and make sure you know everything about both sides.
Yeah, and I think it's important to distinguish too. If you try to use everything on there, and I know you've heard this before, if you try to use everything on there, you're going to actually sound worse than if you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
there's a delicate balance, and I think it's a lot of young broadcasters, and I know I did this early in my career, and I still do. I catch myself to this day because you're so invested in the time that you've put in to your preparation and to the game that you want to prove at times to the audience how much you know about the teams. You do not have to prove to the audience how much you know. That will come through in the broadcast. So just because you have something, remember what's being played out in front of you, whatever that game may be, that's the most important thing. So a lot of the information you have, because the way the game is transpiring, may not be relevant. Always remember that the game in front of you is the most important thing. That information should supplement it. It should supply some stats or figures maybe to back up a great point that you're making, or something that you can feed your analyst where you can get a thought out of them. But it should always be relevant to the game taking place in front of you. And that always is what drives the game. Has to drive the broadcast, not your prep. The prep is what provides that extra complementary detail to what you're seeing out there on the field, court, ice, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, that's very fantastic. I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's one of those things that's going to come natural to you, especially if you're familiar with the team you're calling, which I know you've done a lot of Penn State in your past. So can you talk to me a little bit? How is it like working for Penn State athletics?
Yeah, it's been a great honor. I mean, I went to school here. My family's from Pennsylvania. All my friends and family members basically still live in Pennsylvania. So it's been a really great fit for me. And to see athletes compete at the highest level of college sports with great fan base, it really has been a real blessing for my career to be able to spend it here at Penn State for the first decade of, I can't even believe I've been out of school for 10 years now. But it's been fun. And when I was in school here, I always felt that what made Penn State special, and look, your audience, I'm sure everyone's seen the whiteouts at Beaver Stadium, and some of the great players, Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley, have had a chance to cover. Linebacker it's the people though at Penn State that make it special. The people I work with every day, the coaches, they make you feel welcome. I've been able to form some great relationships with the coaches, the student athletes, the administrators, the fans. And I really think it's the people in this community that makes Penn State a unique place, and why it's been so successful across college sports. So right out of school, I started working. And what's interesting in this industry is, a lot of the jobs aren't full time. I was doing radio for the women's volleyball team. And this was right after they had gone on a streak of winning 109 consecutive matches and 4 straight national championships. And obviously they have a great history here. But I was also delivering furniture at a local furniture store during the day so I could make money, so I could do the broadcasting and immerse myself into the broadcasting that I wanted to do. I was working with the women's basketball team. I wrestled in high school. I didn't know a ton about basketball and volleyball. Maybe when I went to school, I always dreamed of being a basketball or a football announcer, but that helped open up some doors for me. And then I started working with the baseball team, and then Penn State went Division I for hockey. And I'd always been a hockey fan, but I'd never broadcasted hockey. But because of the relationships from a personal and career perspective now, because of the relationships I built and the networking that I did within Penn State and the trust that I had, with the athletic department because the work that I was able to do on women's volleyball, that opened up the doors for me to move up, quote unquote, move up and work with the hockey team and work with Learfield IMG College. Filled in on some men's basketball games, and then working with the hockey. All of a sudden, you do hockey for 5 or 6 years, and I sent my tapes into Westwood One, and I was doing the national championships for the national radio broadcast. So Penn State's opened a lot of doors personally for me as well. So I always feel a debt of gratitude to the people here and the people I've worked with, the coaches, the administration throughout the years for what they've helped me achieve during my career as well.
That's awesome. I mean, I know Penn State is definitely, in my opinion, it's definitely has one of the best atmospheres in all of college sports. I mean, there's nothing like it. I know a couple of people go to Penn State and they absolutely love it, especially the whole athletics field. But I also really love how you mentioned how it's important to make sure that, you know, you might not be able to get that opportunity of like those sports that you're aiming for at first. Like everyone wants to go with basketball and football. They're like, that's the only thing I want. But it's also important to realize that there's other sports out there too. And that sometimes it's okay to, you know, hold off on the basketball and football and get experience covering other sports. And I know for me, being able to have experience covering a variety of sports, it's only helped enhance my skills. And I'm sure it's done the same for you as well.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be the broadcaster I am today without the opportunity to do women's volleyball or soccer, softball, all those Olympic sports. Not only does it give you more reps as a broadcaster, I think it shows you how to prepare and learn a sport. The speed of volleyball really helped me when I transitioned to doing ice hockey. Now volleyball, you get a break between each point, which is nice. Hockey, you can go for 5 or 10 minutes without a whistle sometimes. And those are the opportunities. Look, everyone wants to do football and basketball. I think you can distinguish yourself by doing those other sports and develop those relationships and open some doors and not be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to do something that's a challenge. Don't be afraid to do something you're not comfortable with. Because for me, and I've heard this from a lot of people I've talked to over the years within, whether it's college sports, or people who have moved up and climbed the ladder, it's those opportunities that get you to the basketball, the football. Number one, there's less competition. Number two, there's less people that feel comfortable doing it, so they're afraid to do it. And the third aspect of it is those are the valuable experiences you need to grow and develop as a broadcaster. If you're just, for instance, when I was in school at Penn State, I was in student radio, and it's called Com Radio at Penn State, student radio station, and there were 150 members. Well, we would only get to do, as a student radio station, as an individual, we did every game, but the individual, because there's so many people vying for those games and those spots, I'd call 1 or 2 football games a year, 1 or 2 basketball games a year. And I think the most valuable part of growing as a broadcaster is getting on air and just doing it and growing and getting tapes and listening back to it and reaching out to people in the industry and getting feedback from them and being seen and being on site and developing relationships within the athletic department. And, you know, if you're going to cover a game or you're going to shadow a broadcaster professionally, shake hands, say who you are. That with virtual communication today, that face-to-face relationship and that face-to-face communication is still really valuable and really important. And I think I was the guy that was seen at the wrestling matches. I was the guy that was seen at the softball games, the volleyball matches, whatever it may be across campus. And all of a sudden, the athletic department, instead of just working for student radio, the athletic department started, hey, Brian, we need someone to do color for the baseball games this weekend. Would you be interested? Hey, a spot opened with the women's basketball. It's going to be on the Learfield IMG Penn State Sports Network. I think if you prep, you might not know a ton about basketball. We think you'll be a great addition to the broadcast. Sure. I don't think I would have gotten those opportunities if I just sat around and waited to do my 1 or 2 football games, 1 or 2 basketball games. No matter how good my tape of that broadcast may have been, I don't think that would have created the opportunities that I had today.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make there. It's all about taking advantage of those opportunities. And sometimes it's the little things that can help you move forward within the industry. I want to know, I want to take you back. Do you remember the first game that you ever announced?
Yeah, I think in college, that live play-by-play. When I was in high school, I was doing some PA announcing. My brother's 2 or 3 years younger than me, so I do PA announcing for his football games. But the first game I announced was, I believe, a baseball game at the end of my freshman year of college. And I don't have the tape. I wish I had the tape. Um, and I can only imagine what it sounds like to me today. But it was a baseball game. And I remember thinking the entire planet was listening, even though there's definitely no one listening, maybe my mom and dad, and just being nervous about every word I said, stumbling through it, probably trying to imitate the broadcasters I've grown up listening to more than actually just calling it with my own voice. But being thrown in and getting on air, it was fun. Once you do it, there's an adrenaline rush that comes with being on air live, I think. And once you do it a couple of times, there's nothing quite like it. I know after every game, I always want to go back and maybe listen to this part. Oh, I think I did this really well. I think I did this poorly. And that started the first time I was on air at 18 years old, which is scary to see.
That's fantastic. I mean, that honestly sounds pretty similar to my experience calling my first game, because I remember it was a women's soccer game and there was a goal scored literally in the first minute of that game. So it was just crazy. First game, quick goal right out the gates. But like you said, like you always want to go ahead and quickly listen back to your broadcast right after you finish. I know a lot of athletes, they go back and look at the film, but broadcasters, we do the same thing too. So in some ways, it's sometimes like being an athlete as well.
Yeah, I think it changes as you go on in the profession too. Like if I'm traveling, I don't have a chance to go right back and listen. But I think it's really important at least to put a couple of minutes. You don't have time to listen to the whole broadcast, but to go back and listen to a couple of minutes of every broadcast now and then, and make sure, I listen for crutch words I may be saying, my pacing, how I'm working with my analysts, just general vocal tendencies. Am I repeating the same word maybe one too many times during a hockey game? I like to have a diverse vocabulary calling hockey. But I think it's really important because, number one, you know yourself the best. You know the situation that you were in that game. Maybe there was a technical issue and that threw you off, which is going to happen during your career at some point. So how did you handle that situation? But you're also probably your harshest critic. I think anyone in this industry, if you're not listening back to your own work with a real keen ear and trying to dissect what you do, I don't know that you're cut out for this business. I think you have to be the one that's willing to critique your own work, and then not only critique your own work, be willing to get critiques and criticism from other people about your work and grow from it. It's a tough industry. It's highly competitive. Not everyone's going to like you. Even if you get to the highest level of broadcasting and are calling the Super Bowl, there are going to be people, and in social media today, oh my goodness, the fans, what they may say. But you're always going to have people who, it's a subjective industry. And that may come not only from fans or social media, but that may come from different coordinating producers or network executives or whoever it may be, administrators at a college that you apply for the job. Sometimes you'll get liked and sometimes you're not going to be liked. And, that's okay. You have to just brush it off and continue to trust in the process of what you're doing in your career. And as a Sixers fan, I hate to say trust the process, but I just did.
I got to ask, you mentioned being a Sixers fan. How do you feel about this past season?
Yeah. Next question. No, I it was really fun to see Embiid healthy, as healthy as possible at the end of the year. I know he had the torn meniscus that he's playing with in the playoffs, but it didn't look like it bothered him that much. You just wonder at his size and 7'2", 300 pounds, basically, how often he falls down. The peak of his career, the pinnacle of his career, and him in his prime and healthy like he was this year for the most part. How many chances you're going to get at a championship with Embiid playing at the highest level? Because I think he was one of the top 3 players in the NBA this year. He was unbelievable. So why they can't get that right mix around him, you just wonder if they're missing their window of opportunity. I think that would be the best way to put it. I thought Seth Curry was great. Tobias Harris disappears at times in big spots in the playoffs. That's concerning. But if you look at the regular season, it's how do they go from being a great regular season team to being a great playoff team? And there may be a few moves that they have to make to achieve that.
Yeah. So I guess just continue to trust the process a little bit longer, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I think as long as Embiid is there, it's still the quote unquote process.
For sure.
Embiid and Simmons are married to that. I just don't know that Simmons is the best guy to get you to where you want to be moving forward. But what's his value going to be like in a trade right now? Are you still going to be able to, would you have to package Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, and a draft pick? Would that get you with Simmons? Would that get you Damian Lillard? I don't know. What's the right piece to play with Embiid? Because you can't ask Embiid. I think the problem against the Hawks is they're asking Embiid to carry them for the entire game. And a guy at his size, his body, he's not going to be able to go all Kevin Durant in the fourth quarter. It's just centers aren't built to do that. But if you're getting 38 and 15 out of Embiid and he's knocking down free throws, it would be great if you had somebody to kick to or someone else that could make a jump shot or create their own shot, drive the lane, not be afraid to take the shot. That could really help them take that next step.
No, definitely. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, every NBA offseason is so unpredictable. You see a crazy trade that you never saw coming. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun. But I want to just getting back to your play-by-play announcing. I want to know, what would you say is the importance of creating your own sort of brand and style as a play-by-play announcer? Because I know oftentimes, especially us college students, we sometimes think, oh, our favorite play-by-play announcer is this guy or that guy. We want to be just like him. But at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where you got to understand that you're trying to create your own brand. You're trying to be you, and you don't want to try and be fake on camera. So what would you say to someone who's just trying to create their own style on air?
And doing it on camera is the hardest thing. As I'm sure you and anyone watching knows, to be yourself on camera is really challenging, which I think starting in radio, where you're driving the broadcast as a play-by-play announcer, really helped me get comfortable broadcasting. And then making that step to being on TV, oh man, that's even bigger. But I thought the radio experience was really valuable in helping develop that voice. So at least I knew who I was, or at least who I thought I could be when I went to TV. And then when I started doing more TV stuff, and I still watch it today, I think, I'm stiff sometimes. I don't let my personality show through. I don't exude that on camera. I think it's a really, really challenging thing. Number one, and you started by asking about broadcasters that maybe you really enjoy watching and trying to imitate them. I think it's perfectly fine if I'm watching a football game and I really like what Joe Buck did, or I really like something Adam Amin or Ian Eagle, whoever it may be. I think it's perfectly okay to take little things here and there. I think if you listen to my hockey, a lot of the things that I take a lot of pride in, look, I thought Doc Emmerich was the all-time best to do it. And I've taken a lot of little things that I've picked up that he does well and I enjoy and sprinkled that into my broadcast. But I can't be Doc Emmerich. I can't be John Forsland. I can't be Kenny Albert. I have to be Brian Tripp first and foremost. So I think there's a learning curve there. You may try something one night and you listen back to it and say, man, that didn't work. So you don't go back to it. So I think it is actually important to listen to the pros that do it at the highest level, or even something I've done for my hockey broadcast is the NHL app is great. You can listen to any radio broadcast across the country for free. So sometimes I may click on, let's see, what's the Colorado Avalanche radio guy saying? What is the Philadelphia Flyers radio guy saying? What about the Pittsburgh Penguins? And I may pick a little thing up here or there and use that in my broadcast, but it has to come from your voice. It has to be your personality. And that comes from getting comfortable on air and getting comfortable in who you are. And then you sprinkle those other things in and finding what works for you, what doesn't work for you. There are going to be things that fall completely flat and you just have to know, okay, I'm going to move on and not do that again. And there are going to be things that work really well that you want to try to develop and use in each broadcast. For some people, it's more of a shtick. Like there's a lot of broadcasters, especially in the sport of hockey. Mike Leding from the Pittsburgh Penguins for the longest time, after a goal, scratch my back with a hacksaw, or Elvis has left the building. Look, that is not going to work for me. And I think there are a lot of, being at Penn State, when I was in school, a lot of kids who grew up in Pittsburgh, they would start broadcasting and they'd have these slogans. I'm like, no, that is definitely not working for you right now, guys that I broadcasted with. So you have to find what works for you. That if you have a big personality and you're witty and you can come up with things like that, go for it, try it. let someone tell you, yeah, that doesn't work. So I think it is about that comfortability. It all comes back if you're prepared when you go on air and you're not stressing about what you're going to say or not knowing who number 5 is out there on. If you are prepared, then you'll allow that personality to shine through as well. So I think that that's an important aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I definitely think those two things go hand in hand, of being prepared, and then that'll eventually lead to you feeling more comfortable, especially if you're doing it on television. But I love how you mentioned the importance of radio, because I feel like even though a lot of people think of television when you think of watching sports, radio is something that, it's old school, something that is still relevant today in the sports media industry. I want to know, for you, what do you see? I know the obvious difference between radio and television, one you can see, one you can't.
Yeah.
But for you, are there any similarities that you see between broadcasting on television and radio?
I think you always have to be a storyteller. That's first and foremost. That television, look, you may not have to add the description of what color their uniform is. Are they moving left to right? Are they on the near wing? Are they on the far wing? You don't have to add if it was a right-handed layup. Was it a left-handed shot? That kind of thing. You don't have to add on television, but you're still telling a story. You have a little bit more leeway to tell that story on television, because on radio, you are the eyes, the ears. You are the entire conduit to whatever's happening in that building to the audience. Maybe you describe on radio that he skates the puck behind the net and he skates it on top of the blue block NCAA logo that's on the ice behind the net. That might just be an interesting little thing to add. Maybe you describe that when he brings it up the ice, this player, for instance, baseball, he's wearing a 3/4 sleeve shirt out there on the mound underneath his white pinstripe jersey. Those things you integrate into the storytelling aspect on radio, because you are the eyes and the ears for the audience. But I think it all comes back to storytelling. Why is this game important? What are the stories of the players? But the unique challenge is on radio that you have to describe the action, give the time and score. You have to tell me who has the ball, where they have the ball, what the action is with the ball, puck, whatever it may be. There's not a graphic, a lower third with their stats up there. So you have to give the statistics that may be on TV. They throw the graphic up, you're having a conversation, and you say, there are someone's stats. Or maybe you don't acknowledge the graphic as well. Television is such an industry that's driven by not only the play-by-play guy, but your analyst. You set them up to be the star, the producer, the director, everyone that works behind the scenes. And they're the real stars of the broadcast. And the play-by-play person on TV is just there steering the ship, trying to keep everyone on track and develop a flow and a rhythm. Radio, and this is what I love the unique challenge. I think it helped me become a really good play-by-play broadcaster, is you're the star. Once that light goes on, for lack of a better term, once you're on air, you don't have a camera guy. You don't have an analyst, but you have an analyst, but you're the person that's in charge. The producer can only do so much for radio. An engineer can only do so much for radio. You're the one who has to guide the ship, tell the story of the broadcast, describe what's happening. And I think that made me a really good play-by-play announcer from doing so much work in radio. And I think personally, if I had the choice, I'd rather do radio. I think it's fun. I think that everyone goes back to their roots at some point. And for the most part, everyone starts either in audio streaming now on websites, or back in the day on radio. And to be that person that the audience relies on for the broadcast, and for a baseball, okay, he's into the windup, here comes the 1-2 pitch, swing and a miss, they win the World Series. That, to me, growing up and listening to games, I just love the challenge of painting the picture for an audience. And I think radio allows you to do that. That's truly the great play-by-play broadcasters that can do it without the visual medium behind it. Not to take anything away from the guys doing TV, and you know why they do TV. There's way more money in it. So we all aspire for that as well, probably.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think it's really important that people out there know that radio is just as fun. I mean, it's something that, yeah, it can be a challenge, but I think it's also the ultimate test as a broadcaster, and it's good to just get experience everywhere. And you mentioned, working with color analysts. I've heard from some people, it's weird because some people will say, oh, okay, when I work with these different color analysts, it depends who I'm working on. Like that, depending on who I'm working on is the kind of broadcaster I'm going to be. But then there's some people that are like, oh, I'm going to bring the same exact style, no matter who I'm working with. I'm going to be who I am. Like, I'm Wendell Epps. I'm going to be Wendell Epps no matter who I'm working with. I want to know for you, what are your thoughts on that, working with different color commentators? And are you the kind of person that adapts to who you work with?
Yeah, I think it is important to adapt with who you work with, but not change who you are, if that makes sense, Wendell.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always going to be Brian Tripp. I'm always going to bring my flair, my passion. I think if you ask people, how would you describe what my broadcasts are? I'm passionate, I'm energetic, I'm prepared. So I'm always going to bring those three things to the table. When I work a hockey game, I know my analyst likes to pick his spots a little bit more when to jump in. When I work a men's basketball game for Penn State, I work with a guy named Dick Girardi, who's their longtime analyst, and he typically works with Steve Jones, who's the play-by-play and guy of football and basketball at Penn State. And Dick, he'll jump in more. So I know, look, I'm not going to change my calls, but I know, hey, Dick is going to jump in after every basket. If they bring the ball up the floor and Dick sees something, he might jump in when, typically you may not hear that analyst, but that's his style. And he has such great knowledge. I want to make sure I give him room while still incorporating the nuts and the bolts to the broadcast. So I might back off my description a little bit when I'm working with Dick, because people want to hear what he has to say. So I think it's knowing when that person wants to jump in, what their style is. I think that's how I incorporate it into the broadcast. When I do high school football, my analyst prefers that I set him up with questions more often than him just, sometimes you may have to prompt your analyst if it's someone you're working with for the first time. I think it's really important to get to know the person before you go on air with them. Easier said than done sometimes. You might not find out who you're working with until a couple hours. If you're a student, you might just, hey, you're the other person who signed up for this game. It's great to see you. Hi, I'm Brian. Nice to meet you. But it would be great to be able to, go out to dinner, go out and grab a coffee, whatever it may be. Get to know that person as a person. You start to develop some chemistry too that way. And like what the rhythm of the conversation is going to be like. And hopefully you can carry that right over to the air. I think it's easier said than done. But I've noticed that helps. But like football, I have to maybe prompt. If it's not a question, maybe it's a statement, because I don't think you always have to ask a question to prompt your analyst. So I think there's a unique dynamic there, but I never change who I am. I just change maybe how much I impact or how much I guide the broadcast to give that analyst the room that they're comfortable with or what they need to be successful. It's all about making them successful, but not changing who you are.
That's a really great answer. And I think, you really hit the nail in the coffin there by saying it's important to get to know the person you're working with beforehand, if you can. Mm-hmm. I know from past experiences, people that I've been able to meet before we actually call the game, whether just sitting down for 10 minutes talking, like, it definitely helps. And it definitely makes a pretty sizable difference. So I want to know, go ahead.
Let me add one thing there too. And it might not be, I think it'd be great to sit down and talk to your analyst about, hey, what do you feel like are the keys to this game? What really intrigues you? What storylines? I think that's all good and important, but also, hey, where are you from? What's your background? Just to get to know the person a little bit. And who knows, maybe you'll have some filler during the game. You need something to talk about, or maybe something comes up during the game where you at least can show that you have a little bit of fun. If you're not having fun with it, we talk so seriously all the time about score, time, analyst. How do you work your analyst in? What's the proper way to get in and out of a break? What do you do for your prep? What are the storylines you're looking for? The number one thing ultimately is, are you enjoying what you're doing? If you're not enjoying it, if you sound like you're more worried about what you're saying, and if you're stiff, it's sports. It's meant to be fun, and it's meant to showcase the athletes out there on the field, but also, if you're the broadcaster, exude some personality. If you're not having fun, I don't want to listen to you. I've listened to a couple of tapes over the last couple of years, and I've heard some great, and I mean great, play-by-play broadcasters. And they have the nuts and bolts down, and they sound like they know everything, but they don't sound like they're having fun. And to me, that's the biggest turnoff as an audience member. Enjoy it. Have fun. Develop that chemistry, that relationship with that person. And that's why I think getting to know them on a personal level is really important as well.
I love that. I'm really glad you mentioned that because it's for me. I mean, I know both you and I, we do play by play, like we have an understanding of it, but at the same time, it's very obvious to tell right away if a play by play announcer's into it or not. And I think just having that passion, being energetic, and like you said, it's sports, so you have every right to go crazy, and no one will judge you because there are some crazy things that happen in sports. So seriously, I mean, you have a lot of leeway on air to do what you want to do.
Yeah, you do. And you never know, as a young broadcaster, my advice would be you never know who's listening and when.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you think, oh, this game's not as important as the other games, or I'm doing this sport, I'm not as excited about this assignment. And look, there are things throughout your career that you're not going to be thrilled to be doing. I love what I do, but there's sometimes when I go to this game or that event, I'm like, do I really have to do it today? As much as we love it, there are going to be those moments still in broadcasting, especially with sports. Maybe it's the end of a long road trip or the end of a long season. COVID had its own interesting obstacles. But once you're on the air, you never know who's listening. You never know when that, for you personally, when that person listening might present the next opportunity to you. And also remember that if there's a game going on, these players out there are giving it their all. So isn't it only fair that you give it your all too? And that's something I've always tried to carry with me when I go to a broadcast, that, look, this may not be the assignment I'm most thrilled with today, but I always feel obligated to my audience, whether it's just a couple of parents on that day or it's 100,000 people on that day. I always feel obligated to my audience to do the best I can for them, for the players on the field, and for the people that are employing me to work that job, whatever it may be. So there will be those moments during your career. They're far and few between, but I always think it's important to bring your A game no matter what the circumstance may be.
Absolutely, because parents are definitely watching the broadcast. There's no denying about that. I definitely realized that quickly. And hey, I mean, it's just a really great point, because that's something that I learned recently. Honestly, that wasn't something I really knew about too much, about understanding that, hey, parents are watching this. I really, should understand that, they're really invested into it. But I will say,
it brings with it its unique challenges too. Like when you're working college sports, you have to remember these are student athletes, and they may make mistakes on the field. And the thing that I've learned is to never make it personal. Look, they're playing at a high level. They're playing college sports. It is completely fair to acknowledge if the third baseman made an error or if a guy made a mistake. But the moment you make it personal and say, John Smith he's a terrible player, that's crossing the line as a broadcaster. And you may hear from coaches that, why'd you say that about my team? So never make it personal. It's certainly okay to acknowledge mistakes, but I always try to prevent making it personal, because you never know, or you may know and just aren't able to share it on air because it's not something that you should share. These people are going through relationships and career. Like, there's a lot going on behind the scene, maybe with their family or an illness or, whatever comes with being in college and maybe getting a little trouble sometimes. You never know what someone's going through. So I always try to remember that when I'm discussing a player or a mistake or something, and also know that their family and friends are listening, and you're representing. That's the one thing with Penn State. Like, I take so much pride in representing the university. Not only are you their announcer, you're a representative of the school. And I know the prestige and honor that comes with that. So I always keep that in the back of my mind as well.
That's fantastic. I mean, the things you've done at Penn State, you've done some amazing things for them. I know they're thrilled to have you part of their program. So I have to know, what's your favorite memory working at Penn State?
Oh man, that's really, really tough. I've gotten to cover a lot of great events. Was with the women's volleyball team when they won a national championship in Seattle, and was around those players for a couple of years. So that was fun to see. Again, it comes back to more, I like seeing the people I've developed relationships with have success. But the best was when the Penn State hockey team won its first Big Ten championship. They went to, and this was the final year of Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, and the tournament was still held at that time. They would play 3 games on 3 consecutive days, and Penn State knocked off Michigan, then Minnesota in double overtime, and then Wisconsin in double overtime on a breakaway game winner to win their first Big Ten championship. They're kind of the underdogs, and to see the program win its first championship and to be on the call for that moment, that was probably my favorite moment so far during my career. There's been a lot, but that's the one that if I had to pick, that's the one that stands out.
That's a great moment. Nothing beats that. I mean, that's every broadcaster's dream to be able to be a part of something like that. So moving forward, because I know the sports media industry, it seems like it changes month by month, sometimes day by day, to be honest with you. I'm going to give you this question here. I want to see how well you can answer this. I think you're going to answer it pretty well. 10 years from now, where do you see the sports media industry? Like, what do you think is going to change within the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the availability to have games, streaming, information at your fingertips, we're going to continue to see that. So I think the linear TV broadcast that we've grown accustomed to, you're still going to see that for the major sports, but that streaming component is the biggest thing. The podcasting is going to continue to grow, what you're doing right here. Everyone has a voice now in sports. I think fan engagement is always going to be really important, but will we still hear radio drive time talk shows, or are we going to be able to find a podcast? Look, if I'm an Eagles fan, which I am, do I have to listen to ESPN and Sports Center and wait for them to talk about the Eagles? Or am I more going to be, all right, I'm just going to click on my favorite podcast. I'm just going to go to my favorite website and watch the videos that they post. The same thing for live games. Now every game at every level, and that starts with 12-year-old girls softball all the way up through high school and college, small college, big college, pro sports, semi-pro, whatever it may be, beer league, everything's streaming and available. So it's great for broadcasters. There's a ton of opportunities out there, but you're going to continue to see that market continue to grow. But yeah, that's a tough question because it does change so much. But I think the streaming and having whatever information, whatever game, whatever podcast, available, the immediacy of that, and being able to, as a consumer, select what you want to really watch. Just like you're on Netflix, I'm only going to watch crime shows, or I'm only going to watch that, and to be able to select it, that's probably the way it's going to continue to go. But then again, like live sports, I don't know how much could it really change though with live sports. It's not like if a game is on at 5, I'm watching the game at 5. I'm not gonna, the Phillies played at noon today, let me watch it at 8 o'clock at night. No, because I'm already gonna know because of Twitter or my MLB app. I'm already gonna know the score. So it's live sports. How much can it really? It's not like you're gonna go on Netflix and let me watch the game from 2023. No, like, yeah, we might do that for a nostalgic purposes at some point, but live sports are still, like, you're still going to watch them live. I just think the ways we watch them is what's really going to change.
Yeah, I think we've already seen that too with different ways, all these different streaming platforms. And you had an NFL playoff game on Nickelodeon this past year. So
yeah,
everything just, changes, and technology, it helps a lot with the broadcast too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, 25 years ago, the glowing puck was a big thing from Fox in 1995, 1996. Fox tried it with their NHL broadcast. And well, at the time, like if you watch an NHL game in standard def now, my goodness, you can't see what's going on at all. With high definition, you don't need a glowing puck, but that failed. But we'll continue to see those new techniques, new styles, like between the glass, as NBC just signed off NHL for the first time. They're the ones who invented the rink side analyst, and that stuck. So we'll see things that stick and we'll see things that don't throughout the year.
Most definitely. All right, Brian. So I want to go ahead and I want to end this interview asking you some rapid fire questions if you're up for it.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite sports movie?
Oh man. Oh man, that's tough. No, remember the Titans. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Or Happy Gilmore. It's just two completely different things.
Oh, yeah. That's also a great one. If you could describe Penn State sports using just one word, what word would that be?
Yeah. Excellence.
If you could describe your broadcasting style using just one word, what would it be?
Passionate.
I know you already talked about this, but favorite sports team?
Philadelphia Eagles.
Nice. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh man. Wow. That's really tough. I thought the other ones were tough. I'd like to go back in time.
That's cool. What era would you go back to?
I don't know that I'd go that far back. I just love to be able to see. I'd like to be able to meet and interact with like some of the historical figures over the years and talk to that. Like, could you imagine sitting down and having dinner with Abraham Lincoln or, like I think time travel would be really cool.
Awesome. Favorite social media platform?
Instagram. Twitter has too much vile on it.
I feel that. What's one food you can't live without?
Oh, ice cream.
And what's one fun fact that a lot of people do not know about Brian Tripp?
Oh, dear. Well, I always joke with people that I was a state wrestling champion, but my team won. It wasn't me. I was terrible. Man, what is a fact about me? Gosh, I don't know that there is anything fun about me.
There's something. Is there, if you weren't doing broadcasting, how about this? If you weren't doing broadcasting, what would you be doing right now?
Meteorologist.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would
Okay.
be in meteorology. I like the weather. It fascinates me.
Cool. All right, Brian. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast today. I mean, you've done just such a great job explaining, giving some great advice. I mean, this is something that I'll definitely be taking for sure. So just thank you so much for coming on, Brian.
Well, I couldn't do it without excellent questions, and it was really fun for me, and I look forward to following your career as well, Wendell. So this was a lot of fun for me. I'm glad I could take a few minutes and help you out today.
Of course. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Yep, no problem.
All right, fellas, so that was a sports student interview with Brian Tripp. Another big shout out to Brian for coming on the podcast today. He was an absolutely amazing guest to have. He provided some very, very valuable insight on what it's like being a play-by-play announcer, as well as what it takes to succeed in the sports media industry. But that'll do it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next one. All right, y'all, take care. Sports student, signing out. Peace.